So, my dear friends in Christ, tonight what I want to do is I want to walk through the Holy Mass, and I want to do so through the eyes of the prophet Isaiah from the first reading today. Because the readings today are beautiful, and in both like the first reading and the gospel today, we see Isaiah and St. Peter, and they both have this intense encounter with the living God. And they both find themselves experiencing like this intense feeling of awe and shame at the same time. And this is really important to remember because I think a lot of times, especially when we're talking about the Mass, we speak about it in sort of like this nonchalant way. We're just like, oh yeah, like, I went to Mass, received communion, and now I'm just going to like move on with my life and eat pizza or whatever it is you're going to do. Like as if it's just like one thing among the many things that we do. But I think what's really important and what the readings remind us and what like the church is constantly reminding us is that at every Mass we encounter God himself. We encounter and receive the living God. Like look at St. Peter. When he encounters God, what does he do? He literally falls to his knees and he says, "Depart from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man." He doesn't be like, "Oh yeah, cool, like that was really cool, Jesus, great catch. I'm just gonna like keep moving." He's like, he recognizes in himself this like deep like sin because he realizes he's in the presence of God himself in that moment. And I think that's like really good to keep in mind, right? We don't want to be too casual when we talk about our encounter with God at every Mass. It's amazing. Okay, and so to go through again Isaiah's first reading because it's really beautiful. The first thing I want to look at is his reaction when he first enters the presence of God. His first reaction is this awareness of his sinfulness and humility, just kind of like St. Peter. And I think what's so cool is like at the beginning of every Mass, we have that same thing. The first thing that we do at Mass after the sign of the cross is we enter into the Penitential Act. And what are we doing during that time, right? We are recognizing this natural feeling within ourselves of our sinfulness and our shame upon coming into the temple of the Holy God. Like we're recognizing that we are not worthy, that we are sinful, and that without the grace of God, what on earth are we doing here? Like we recognize our deep need for God. And I think what's so cool is like we come in and we straight up acknowledge before everybody, not only that we are people of unclean lips, but that we are living among people of unclean lips, just like Isaiah was saying, So we say, I confess to Almighty God and to you, my brothers and sisters. Like, I'm not only talking to God at this point, but everybody, like all of us are in deep, desperate need of divine mercy. And so that's how we begin every Mass, to recognize who God is and who we are, that we are sinners in need of his mercy. So we call upon his mercy. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. That's how we begin Mass. That's how Isaiah begins his encounter with God. That's how St. Peter begins his entire ministry too. Depart from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man. Then after that, we have the Gloria, the Liturgy of the Word, a potentially rousing homily depending on how the priest or deacon is doing that night. We'll see what happens tonight. Stay tuned. I hope it's rousing. I don't know. And then we profess our faith, and then we enter into the liturgy of the Eucharist, which is the high point of the Mass. And at every single Mass, we hear that angelic song that Isaiah hears in the first reading. And again, when Isaiah hears this hymn of adoration, he's not listening to a bunch of human beings proclaiming the holy, holy, holy. When he hears the Sanctus, he hears it from the seraphim, from literally the highest choir of angels. It's the seraphim who proclaim this beautiful, beautiful hymn. And at every Mass we hear it to this day. Thousands of years later, we hear the holy, holy, holy at every Mass. And what's so cool is that we can't see it, with our human eyes, but by faith, we believe that the sanctuary is literally flooded with angels. And that psalm was echoing this beautiful hymn like over and over again, right? Right? With the angels, I will sing praise to God. With the angels, and that's what happens at Mass. In the preface, the priest usually prays something like this, and it's a little different depending on what the preface is. But tonight I'm going to be praying this. And so with angels and archangels, thrones and dominions, and with all the hosts and powers of heaven, we sing the hymn of your glory. This is so cool. And then a lot of times we can just like kind of blow through this in our mind, but like, man, if we really like slow down and be like, wait a minute, okay, with angels and archangels, thrones and dominion, with the choirs of angels, and with not some of the hosts and powers of heaven, but all of them are at Mass. And it is amazing. St. John Chrysostom, he's one of my favorite saints. He said that angels surround the priest and the whole sanctuary is filled with angels honoring Christ, present in the Eucharist. He continues that the angels exalt, the archangels rejoice, the cherubim and seraphim join us in the celebration of the feast. Then he asks, what room is there for sadness? I love that. It's like, here is this excellent, most excellent, like, praise to God. And like, is there any room for sadness at all when we're at the Mass, especially this high point of the Mass? Because again, all of the angels, the entire host of heaven is praising God with us. That's so cool. And also one little quick plug, I don't know if you're into YouTube or not. I dabble in YouTube. There's this really cool short film. It's 7 minutes long, and I'd really recommend it. Maybe you've seen it already. It's called The Veil Removed. The Veil Removed. So jot that down on I know you guys are taking notes, so jot that down. It's really, really beautiful. What it is it's this little glimpse into what's going on at the Mass and what it would look like, what it might look like if the veil was removed and we could see what is going on. It's just this amazing thing. You go around and it looks at the people in the pews, and then all of a sudden these angels start processing in and flooding the sanctuary. It's beautiful. So it's called The Veil Removed. If you have 7 minutes later on, check that out. It's awesome. Okay, so then after that, what happens to the prophet Isaiah? This angel takes a burning coal from the altar of God and places it on his unclean lips. So he's like, I have unclean lips, I'm unworthy to be here, but I just heard this beautiful hymn of praise. And so what do we see here? Like, this is amazing. Like, within that coal, what are we looking at? Within the coal, we see a type and image of the most holy Eucharist, which is also taken from the altar of God, and it purifies us of venial sin when it is placed on our lips. That's so cool. Like, when we receive the living God in the most holy Eucharist, we are purified and made clean. Like, the venial sins that are hanging on are burned away. And again, if you have any like mortal or more serious sins, definitely bring those to the confessional. But like, just know that if there's any venial sin on your soul, it is burned away at the Mass. It's awesome. And again, I think that's such a beautiful image of like this burning coal, because what do we see in the most holy Eucharist but the Eucharist which is burning with divine love. And the effect of receiving the Eucharist should be to inflame our hearts with love for God and love for each other. It's awesome. Again, to quote St. John Chrysostom, because he is full of quotes, he says that the Eucharist is a fire which inflames us, that like lions breathing fire, we may retire from the altar, being made terrible to the devil. I mean, amazing. That like at first we come in, we recognize our unworthiness, and then he gives himself to us and makes us terrible to the devil because of the fire of his love. That's, I don't know, is there a more awesome thing? And I realize I've already said awesome like at least 12 times, so I know people keep track of that too. I'm sorry, I can't help it. It's amazing. It is amazing. Okay, then once that happens, what finally happens at the end is the Lord looks at Isaiah and he says, "Whom shall I send? Who's going to go for us?" And Isaiah exalts with this like excitement. He's like, "Here I am, send me." Like, send me. Like when we encounter and receive the living God, what is our response always? Like when we recognize it, our response ought to always be this desire to be sent, this desire to be sent out. And so at the very end of Mass, we hear the priest or deacon say, "Go forth, the Mass is ended." In the Latin Mass, it's this very like sort of abrupt thing. Ite missa est. This very abrupt thing. Go. And if you were to translate it, you could translate it, "Go forth, the Mass is ended." But you could also translate it basically like, "Get out of here. The sacrifice is over. Go and light the world on fire." Like, allow yourself to be sent by God. Like, get out of here and like light the world on fire. You know, it's amazing. And so, my dear friends in Christ, what is the Holy Mass? It's not just one thing out of the many things that we do as Catholics. It's literally the one thing necessary. Like there could be nothing greater or more necessary for us than the Mass. So to bring it all together, what are we looking at? We come to Mass with heavy hearts. We recognize our need for God, our need for his mercy. We hear from his sacred word. We profess our faith. We give praise to God and we give him adoration and honor. And though we are unworthy, he offers himself to us in the most holy Eucharist. Jesus lights our hearts on fire and he sends us forth. And here's another quote that I just love, which kind of like ties it together. It's Padre Pio. He said, it is easier for the earth to exist without the sun than without the holy sacrifice of the Mass. Like, it is the most important thing ever. And so when the church says, go to Mass on Sunday and holy days of obligation, she's not saying it to us because she wants to be hard on us. The church is telling us to go to Mass because she knows what's good for us and she knows what we need. And we need nothing more than the Mass. I mean, the Mass is literally the thing that we most need in our life. It is amazing. So at this Mass, let's fall to our knees like St. Peter. Let's allow ourselves to be purified and sent.